Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk about one of the worst things to ever happen to music. But don't worry, musicians themselves were not to blame. The people to blame were the wives of some powerful DC senators in 1985 when they formed the Parent Music Resource Council. And this was an organization which, according to Zappa, who tried to call them, they have no leadership structure, just founders. He asked if it was a cult. They didn't answer him, but I would say it was a cult. It was the cult of censorship because they, despite their name, wanted to undermine the role of parents and replace it with the role of government. And in doing so, they sent quite a lot of serious shockwaves through the music industry because there were a lot of threats of censorship. There were threats of stores not carrying albums if they were deemed to be, on the proverbial shit list of this organization. It was very bad for music and very bad for creativity, and it was all based on this totally false premise, both morally and scientifically, that words can make you do things. No, they cannot. Actions make you do things, and your own mind makes you do things. And if your mind is so weak that you cannot control the things you do, well, psychiatric help is available, or at least it used to be available before they let all of the psychos out onto the streets. We all know. We all know the story. But anyway, their censorship crusade was something that was really something to. It began as a kind of tit for tat at the music industry because nothing in Washington ever happens in a vacuum. The music industry was upset about piracy. They didn't like the fact that people were taping records and taping the radio and sharing the tapes with their friends. This was before Napster. They didn't know what they had coming. Everyone taped the radio and taped records and made mixtapes for their friends, but the record company, in order to stop this, wanted a blank tape tax. And in order to enact that, they needed Congress. And that's when these wives of these senators decided, well, if they're going to get theirs, we got to get ours. And the whole fiasco really began. And the music industry, possibly unsurprisingly, showed its cowardice in the face of this censorship campaign. And many musicians, including some of the ones that were most targeted, like Prince, didn't actually say anything. It was left to people like Frank Zappa, who really was the main voice on TV, radio, in Senate hearings talking about this. But also, you had Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, who gave very eloquent testimony before a Senate committee about this very subject. And perhaps surprisingly rather, there was John Denver, who's generally considered on the much more mild stylistic side than, Twisted Sister or Zappa. But he made the very good point that his song Rocky Mountain High was actually banned by some radio stations because they thought it was about getting high on drugs rather than the feeling of elation that he felt when in the Rocky Mountains that he loved so much. So he understood that the sword of censorship isn't a delicate instrument, but it's a blunt force that harms creativity, harms the economic life of artists, and really just has a chilling and stifling effect on artistry. They eventually reached a compromise where they would put this parental advisory sticker on the albums, which only made the albums more popular among young people because you didn't want to be lame and have an album that didn't have the sticker. This was something that very correctly Donny Osmond warned about at the time, which is why he, another sort of squeaky clean artist, disagreed with this. And Ice-T had his run-ins with them. Two Live Crew had their run-ins with them. I don't actually know if they still exist. They're kind of irrelevant now because the internet always wins. They tried to censor Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and they still do, but now we have alternatives. And so when it comes to censorship, eventually the good guys win. But it was a very dark day in the 80s when the Parent Resource Music Council, PMRC, tried to ruin things for everyone and really poop on our party. But hey, it happened. We got to talk about it so that it doesn't happen again. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.